What if the person everyone believes is guilty isn't? What if justice is just one voice away from being silenced forever? This is the story of how a silent Comanche changed everything right at the edge of the noose. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The crowd gathered early that morning in Cottonwood Springs, Texas, 1875. The small frontier town, usually quiet under the punishing summer sun, was buzzing with unusual excitement. A wooden platform had been hastily constructed in the town square, its newly cut pine boards still oozing sap in the heat. A noose hung ominously from the crossbeam, swaying slightly in the dry breeze. Sarah Blackwood stood in the jailhouse, her wrists bound with rough rope that chafed her skin raw. Through the small barred window, she could see the crowd growing. Men in dusty hats, women in calico dresses, even children running between adults' legs, all come to watch her die. "It ain't right," muttered Sheriff Mills, a man whose weathered face had seen 40 hard years on the frontier. He stood guard over Sarah, his eyes revealing the conflict within him. A woman facing the gallows. Sarah lifted her chin, her green eyes fierce despite the tear tracks on her dirt-smudged face. "I didn't kill him," she said for what felt like the 100th time. "I didn't kill my husband." The sheriff avoided her gaze. "Jury didn't see it that way, ma'am. They found the knife in your hand. I pulled it out to try to save him." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Why would I kill the only person who ever showed me kindness in this godforsaken place?" Sheriff Mills sighed, removing his hat to run fingers through thinning gray hair. "Don't matter what I believe. Judge has made his ruling." Outside, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Sarah could make out snippets of conversation. "Husband killer" and "crazy woman" reached her ears, cutting like knives. Thomas Blackwood had been found dead in their small homestead 3 days ago, a knife wound to his chest. When neighbors arrived, drawn by Sarah's screams, they found her cradling his body, the bloody knife in her hand. No one believed her story that she'd found him already stabbed, that she'd pulled the knife out in a futile attempt to save him. No one knew about the mysterious tracks she'd seen leading away from their cabin, or the strange items missing from Thomas's desk. No one cared that Thomas had enemies from his days as an Army scout working with the Comanche. The jailhouse door swung open, and Judge Parker stepped in, his black coat immaculate despite the dust and heat. "It's time," he said, his voice cold as the winter prairie. 2 deputies flanked Sarah, gripping her arms as they led her outside. The sunlight hit her like a physical blow after days in the dim jailhouse. The crowd fell momentarily silent as she emerged, then erupted in a mixture of jeers and solemn whispers. "Murderer! Devil woman!" Sarah kept her eyes forward, focusing on the wooden steps she would soon climb. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. As they approached the gallows, Sarah noticed a figure standing apart from the crowd. A tall Native American man, dressed in a mixture of traditional Comanche clothing and cast-off white man's garments. His face was impassive, but his dark eyes followed her intently. She'd seen him before, she realized. He occasionally came to town to trade, though most people gave him a wide berth. Thomas had called him Running Fox and had spoken to him in the Comanche tongue. Thomas had said he was one of the few Comanche who hadn't been forced onto the reservation, who still moved freely across the plains, though at great risk. Something in the man's steady gaze gave Sarah a flicker of hope, though she couldn't say why. Judge Parker cleared his throat, commanding the crowd's attention. "Sarah Blackwood, you have been found guilty of the murder of your husband, Thomas Blackwood. The sentence is death by hanging, to be carried out immediately." Sarah was guided up the steps, each one bringing her closer to her end. The noose was rough and heavy as they placed it around her neck. The sheriff avoided her eyes as he tightened it. "Any last words?" asked the judge. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, some gleeful, some solemn, all expecting to witness her final moments. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I am innocent. Whoever killed my husband is standing among you today. May God forgive you all for what you're about to do." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The judge nodded to the executioner, just as the man reached for the lever that would drop the trapdoor beneath her feet. A commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. People scattered as Running Fox pushed through, moving with determined strides. Toward the gallows. "Stop!" Sheriff Mills called out, drawing his pistol. "Stand back, Indian." Running Fox ignored him, reaching the base of the gallows. For the first time he spoke, his voice accented but clear. "This woman speaks truth. She did not kill." The crowd went silent. Judge Parker's face darkened with anger. "This proceeding is lawful. Stand aside or be arrested." Running Fox reached into a pouch at his waist and pulled out a silver pocket watch. Thomas's watch, which Sarah recognized immediately. It had been a gift from his father and was always kept in his desk. "This belonged to the dead man," Running Fox said. "Found it on a man heading to Mexico. White man with scar on face." He pointed to his own cheek, indicating where the scar would be. "He bragged of killing. Said woman would hang for his deed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest. "That's Thomas's watch," she cried. "It was missing after he was killed." Sheriff Mills approached cautiously, taking the watch from Running Fox's outstretched hand. He examined it, then looked up at the judge. "It's got Blackwood's initials engraved on the back, Your Honor." Judge Parker frowned. "This proves nothing. The watch could have been stolen after she killed him." "The man I found had blood on his shirt," Running Fox continued. "And papers from Blackwood's desk, papers about Army, about Comanche territories." A man pushed forward from the crowd. Colonel Hargrove, the commander from the nearby fort, who had attended the trial. "Blackwood was mapping potential sites for a new fort," he said reluctantly. "That information would be valuable to certain interests looking to disrupt our operations." For the first time, doubt showed on the judge's face. "Sheriff, remove the prisoner from the gallows while we consider this new evidence." Sarah felt the noose being lifted from her neck, her legs nearly buckling beneath her as relief flooded through her body. As she was led down the steps, her eyes met Running Fox's. She mouthed a silent, "Thank you," and he acknowledged it with the slightest nod. She didn't know what would happen next, but she had been granted something she thought impossible just moments ago. Time. Time to prove her innocence. Time to find justice for Thomas. And perhaps time to understand why this silent Comanche had risked everything to save a white woman he barely knew. The jailhouse was quieter now, the excited crowds having dispersed to discuss the dramatic interruption of Sarah's execution. She sat on the hard wooden bench, still processing her narrow escape. Sheriff Mills had removed her restraints and brought her a cup of water, which she sipped gratefully. Judge Parker and Colonel Hargrove were speaking in hushed tones outside the cell. Running Fox stood silently in the corner, his presence seemingly forgotten by the officials, but acutely felt by Sarah. "We need to find this scarred man," the judge was saying. "If what the Indian says is true... Comanche," Sarah corrected, her voice hoarse. "He's Comanche, not just Indian." The men turned to look at her, surprised by her interruption. "Mrs. Blackwood," Colonel Hargrove said, clearing his throat, "can you think of anyone who might have wanted your husband dead? Anyone with the scar as described?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to focus. Thomas had been acting strangely in the weeks before his death. Nervous. He'd lock himself in his study at night, working on those maps for you. She looked directly at the colonel. He mentioned a man once a former soldier who'd been dishonorably discharged. Said he'd been asking too many questions about the fort locations. "Did he give you a name?" Sheriff Mills asked. "Henson or Henderson, I think." Thomas said he had a nasty scar from a Comanche arrow, right side of his face. Colonel Hargrove's expression darkened. "James Henderson. Discharged last year for selling Army information. We'd heard rumors he was back in the territory." Running Fox spoke, his deep voice startling everyone. man heading to Piedras Negras. 3 days ride. If you leave now, might catch him before he crosses. Judge Parker scowled. And how do we know you're not making this up to save her? What's your stake in this, Comanche? Running Fox's expression remained impassive. Blackwood was fair to my people, helped my sister's son when soldiers shot him. Debt must be paid. Sarah felt a surge of pride for her late husband. This was the Thomas she knew, the man who saw people as people, regardless of the color of their skin. If Henderson's heading to Mexico, we need to move fast, Sheriff Mills said. I'll gather a posse. I'm coming with you, Sarah declared. Standing up. Absolutely not, Judge Parker replied. You're still a suspect, Mrs. Blackwood. Then what? I sit in this cell until you either find Henderson or decide to hang me anyway. Sarah's green eyes flashed with determination. I knew my husband better than anyone. I might recognize things you'd miss. Colonel Hargrove studied her thoughtfully. She has a point. And if Henderson is our man, he'll be expecting pursuit from lawmen, not a woman. She will slow you down. Judge Parker argued. I grew up on a ranch in West Texas, Sarah countered. I can ride as well as any man here and shoot nearly as good. The sheriff looked at her with newfound respect. The lady makes a convincing case. After further deliberation, it was decided. Sarah would accompany the posse, which would consist of Sheriff Mills, 2 deputies, and surprisingly, Running Fox, whose tracking skills would be invaluable. As preparations were made, Sarah was permitted to return to her homestead to gather supplies, accompanied by a deputy to ensure she didn't flee. Stepping into the cabin she'd shared with Thomas brought a fresh wave of grief. Blood still stained the wooden floorboards where he'd fallen. She moved through the rooms quickly, gathering clothing and her husband's spare revolver. In his study, she paused, noticing something odd. The bottom drawer of his desk was slightly ajar, a drawer Thomas always kept locked, glancing to ensure the deputy wasn't watching. Sarah knelt and pulled it open. Inside was a journal she'd never seen before. She quickly tucked it into her saddlebag before the deputy could notice. By midday, the posse was assembled at the edge of town. Sarah had changed into riding clothes trousers under a split skirt, a concession to propriety she maintained despite the impracticality. She'd pinned her long brown hair up under a wide-brimmed hat. Running Fox led the way, reading signs in the dust that were invisible to the others. They rode hard through the afternoon, stopping only when the horses needed rest. As they made camp that evening, Sarah found herself sitting apart from the others. The men were uncomfortable in her presence, a woman who had nearly been hanged that morning, now riding alongside them. Only Running Fox seemed unbothered, methodically preparing his simple meal. When the others were distracted, Sarah pulled out Thomas's journal and began to read by the fading light. Most entries were mundane, but recent pages revealed his growing concerns. Henderson asking questions again. Says he knows what I'm mapping for Hargrove. Threatened to tell what happened at Yellow Creek if I don't share the plans. Cannot let that become public. Too many would suffer, Sarah frowned. Yellow Creek? Thomas had never mentioned such a place to her. She was startled by Running Fox's silent approach. He sat beside her, his dark eyes reflecting the campfire. You find something, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah hesitated, then showed him the journal entry. Did Thomas ever mention Yellow Creek to you? Running Fox's face hardened. Bad place. Soldiers attacked Comanche camp there 3 winters ago. Women, children killed. Your husband was scout, but he tried to stop it. Failed. Thomas was part of a massacre? Sarah whispered, horrified. No, he warned Comanche families. Many escaped because of him. Army never knew. If they found out, he would have been charged with treason, Sarah finished, the pieces falling into place. And Henderson somehow discovered this. Henderson was there. He wanted to kill all Comanche. Your husband stopped him from shooting children. Made enemy that day. Sarah's mind reeled with this new information. Thomas had kept so much from her, trying to protect her. Now his past had caught up with him and nearly cost her life as well. Why didn't he tell me? She asked, more to herself than to Running Fox. Some burdens too heavy to share, the Comanche replied quietly, even with Heart's companion. Their conversation was interrupted by Sheriff Mills approaching. We'll reach the border crossing by tomorrow afternoon if we start at first light, he informed them. Get some rest, Mrs. Blackwood. As Sarah tried to sleep that night, her mind was filled with images of Thomas, not just as the gentle husband she'd known, but as a man carrying the weight of secret heroism and guilt. She wondered what else she would discover about the man she thought she knew so well. And beside these thoughts was her growing awareness of Running Fox, this silent, dignified man who had saved her from the gallows and seemed to know Thomas in ways she hadn't. She felt drawn to him, not romantically, but with a sense that their fates were somehow intertwined beyond this journey. Tomorrow they would reach the border. Tomorrow she might face her husband's killer. Tomorrow she might finally learn the full truth about Thomas Blackwood's life and death. Dawn broke over the Texas plains with a blaze of amber light. Sarah woke from a fitful sleep, her body stiff from the hard ground. The events of yesterday, the noose around her neck, the last-minute reprieve, the revelations about Thomas felt like a fever dream. Running Fox was already awake, studying the horizon. His profile against the rising sun reminded Sarah of the hawk statues Thomas had carved, proud and vigilant. You see something? She asked, approaching him. Dust, riders coming from north. His voice remained calm, but his posture tensed slightly. Sheriff Mills joined them, squinting at the distant cloud of dust. Could be Henderson brought friends. The posse quickly broke camp, mounting their horses with renewed urgency. Running Fox led them along a ravine, providing cover as they continued south. How did you find Henderson in the first place? Sarah asked Running Fox as they rode side by side. Was hunting near Broken Ridge, heard shots. Found white man robbing. Dead traveler, watched him. Heard him brag in saloon about woman hanging for his crime. His dark eyes met hers. Knew Blackwood's wife. Knew you were innocent. You never spoke to me before yesterday, Sarah said, puzzled. Watched from distance. Blackwood spoke of you often. A hint of what might have been a smile touched his lips. Said you had fire in your heart. Sarah felt a pang of grief mixed with warmth at this glimpse of how Thomas had seen her. By midday, they reached a small trading post just 20 miles from the Mexican border. The weathered building stood alone in the vast landscape, a way station for travelers heading south. Henderson could be here, Sheriff Mills said quietly as they approached. Mrs. Blackwood, you stay back with Deputy Jones. If Henderson's inside, I want to face him, Sarah insisted. The sheriff sighed. Ma'am, with all due respect, this man killed your husband and framed you for it. He's dangerous. All the more reason I should be there. Sarah checked Thomas's revolver, which she'd kept hidden in her saddlebag. I won't interfere, but I deserve to look him in the eye. Running Fox nodded slightly. She has earned warrior's right. Sheriff Mills looked between them, then relented. Stay behind us. Any trouble, you get out immediately. The trading post was dim and dusty inside. A few men sat at scattered tables, nursing drinks despite the early hour. Behind the bar, a heavy-set Mexican man eyed the newcomers warily. Looking for a man, Sheriff Mills said, approaching the bar. James Henderson, scar on his right cheek. Might have passed through recently, the barkeeper shrugged. Many men pass through, don't ask names. Sarah scanned the room, her heart racing. None of the men matched Henderson's description. Then her eyes fell on a hat hanging by the door, an Army-issue campaign hat, with a distinctive scratch on the brim. Thomas had described Henderson's hat once, said he'd scratched it in a knife fight. She nudged Running Fox, nodding toward the hat. He followed her gaze, then moved his hand slightly to signal understanding. A door at the back of the room opened, and a man stepped out from what appeared to be a back storeroom. Tall, with sandy hair and a jagged scar running from his right eye to his jaw. The moment he saw the sheriff's badge, his hand moved to his hip. "James Henderson?" Sheriff Mills called out. "We need to have a word about Thomas Blackwood." Everything happened at once. Henderson drew his pistol, firing wildly. The sheriff ducked, returning fire. Patrons scattered, overturning tables for cover. Sarah found herself pulled to the floor by Running Fox, who shielded her with his body as bullets splintered the wooden bar above them. Henderson bolted for a side door. Without thinking, Sarah scrambled up and gave chase, ignoring the sheriff's shout to stay back. The side door led to a small corral where horses were kept. Henderson was already mounting a dappled gray, spurring it toward the open gate. Sarah raised Thomas's revolver, aiming carefully as Thomas had taught her. She fired once, missing, but her second shot caught Henderson in the shoulder. He faltered but kept riding. Running Fox appeared beside her, bow drawn. His arrow flew true, striking Henderson's horse in the flank. The animal reared, throwing its rider to the dust. By the time Sheriff Mills and the deputies reached them, Running Fox had Henderson pinned, a knee on his chest and a knife at his throat. "You broke no law," Henderson spat at Running Fox. "Why protect white people who slaughter your kind?" "Justice has no color," Running Fox replied evenly. Sheriff Mills hauled Henderson to his feet, binding his wrists. "James Henderson, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Blackwood." Henderson's eyes found Sarah's, hatred burning in them. "Your husband was a traitor. Chose Indians over his own kind." "My husband was a man of conscience," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Something you wouldn't understand. You think you know him?" Henderson laughed bitterly. "Ask your Comanche friend what really happened at Yellow Creek. Ask him about the captain's daughter." Sarah frowned, looking to Running Fox, whose expression had hardened. "He lies," Running Fox said, "to create doubt." But Sarah saw something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition. There was more to the story. They secured Henderson to a post while treating his wound and preparing for the journey back to Cottonwood Springs. Sarah found herself sitting apart, turning Henderson's words over in her mind. The captain's daughter? What did that mean? Running Fox approached, offering her a water canteen. She accepted it, then fixed him with a direct gaze. "What wasn't Thomas telling me about Yellow Creek?" she asked quietly. "What about a captain's daughter?" Running Fox was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "Captain had daughter, young woman. She fell in love with Comanche man from camp. Father forbade it. She ran away to be with him, and—" Sarah prompted when he paused. "Captain blamed all Comanche. Ordered attack on camp to find her. Your husband tried to warn camp. Many escaped, but girl and her Comanche man were killed in fighting." Running Fox's eyes met hers. Blackwood carried guilt. Thought he failed them. Sarah felt a chill. Why wouldn't he tell me this? Captain was powerful man. Still is. If truth came out, many would suffer. Blackwood protected you by silence. Sarah absorbed this, picturing Thomas carrying this burden alone. And Henderson knew? Henderson wanted Captain's favor. Threatened to tell lies about Blackwood's role. Say he helped Comanche escape because he hated Army. It made sense now why Thomas had been so secretive. Why he'd been working so hard to prove his loyalty by mapping for the Army. As they prepared to return to Cottonwood Springs with their prisoner, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at Henderson's capture, grief for Thomas resurfacing, and a growing sense that justice was more complicated than she had imagined. The journey back was tense. Henderson made no further attempts to escape, but watched Sarah with calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. That night, as they camped under the stars, Sarah found herself again sitting beside Running Fox, drawn to his steady presence. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for saving me from the gallows, but for helping me understand Thomas better." Running Fox nodded. Blackwood was good man, caught between two worlds. "Like you," Sarah observed. He looked at her, surprised briefly. visible in his eyes. "You move between the Comanche world and the white world," she explained. "Not fully accepted in either, perhaps." "Path is lonely," he acknowledged, "but necessary." Sarah thought about her own uncertain future. The homestead held too many painful memories now. Yet where could a woman alone go in this harsh frontier? "What will you do?" Running Fox asked, seeming to read her thoughts. "After justice is done." Sarah looked up at the vast canopy of stars. "I don't know. I can't stay in Cottonwood Springs. Too many people were ready to see me hang." Blackwood spoke of land to the west, valley with good water. Said it would be place of peace someday. Sarah remembered Thomas mentioning such a place, a valley he discovered while scouting that wasn't on any maps. He'd talked of it as a dream for the future. "Perhaps I'll find it," she said softly. "Start fresh." Running Fox studied her face. "Would take guide to find valley." The offer was implicit in his words. Sarah felt a flicker of hope, not for romance, but for friendship, for a path forward through her grief. As she drifted to sleep that night, Sarah clutched Thomas's journal to her chest. Tomorrow they would return to Cottonwood Springs. Tomorrow Henderson would face justice. And perhaps tomorrow she would begin to envision a future beyond the shadow of the gallows. Cottonwood Springs appeared on the horizon, its buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat like a mirage. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. 3 days ago, she had been dragged from the jailhouse to face execution in that town. Now she was returning with her husband's true killer in custody. The posse drew curious stares as they rode down the main street. Henderson, hands bound and slumped in his saddle, glared defiantly at the gathering onlookers. Word of their approach had evidently spread. A crowd was already forming outside the sheriff's office. Judge Parker stood on the boardwalk, his expression inscrutable as they dismounted. Colonel Hargrove was beside him, along with several prominent townspeople who had been all too eager to see Sarah hang. "I see you found Henderson," the judge remarked as Sheriff Mills hauled the prisoner down from his horse. "Found him heading for Mexico, just like the Comanche said," Sheriff Mills confirmed, "and he had these on him." The sheriff held up a packet of papers, Thomas's maps and notes about the proposed fort locations. "That proves nothing," Henderson snarled. "I won her husband in a card game." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "We also found my husband's pocket watch on him, the one Running Fox showed you. And more importantly, we found this." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A letter in Henderson's handwriting, threatening to expose what happened at Yellow Creek unless Thomas gave him the fort plans. They had discovered the letter hidden in Henderson's saddlebag during the journey back. It detailed his blackmail attempt and, crucially, admitted to taking care of Blackwood when he refused to cooperate. Judge Parker examined the letter, his brow furrowing. He looked up at Sarah, something like regret in his eyes. "This appears to be conclusive evidence, Mrs. Blackwood. It seems a grave miscarriage of justice was narrowly avoided." "No thanks to this town's rush to judgment," Sarah replied coldly. Judge had the grace to look uncomfortable. "The court will formally exonerate you of all charges. As for Henderson, he'll stand trial for murder and treason." Colonel Hargrove stepped forward, clearing his throat. "There's also the matter of Yellow Creek, which this letter references." "That's military business," Sheriff Mills said cautiously. "Not sure it's relevant to the murder charge." "It establishes motive," Sarah insisted. "Henderson wanted revenge against my husband for preventing a massacre, and he wanted those maps to sell to whoever would pay for them." Colonel Hargrove's face darkened. Yellow Creek was a regrettable incident. Captain Brunswick exceeded his orders. If your husband tried to mitigate the damage, he should be commended, not condemned. Yet you let me nearly hang rather than admit. "The Army's mistakes," Sarah said. An uncomfortable silence fell. Several townspeople shifted uneasily, avoiding Sarah's gaze. Running Fox, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "Justice for Blackwood is done. What about justice for Widow?" His question hung in the air. Judge Parker cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwood is free to resume her life with the court's apologies. Apologies don't rebuild a life, Sarah said. Everyone in this town was ready to watch me die. My home is tainted with my husband's blood. My reputation is in tatters. Mrs. Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife who had been particularly vocal about Sarah's guilt, stepped forward unexpectedly. We were wrong, Sarah. I was wrong. Fear and gossip clouded our judgment. She turned to the other townspeople. We owe Mrs. Blackwood more than apologies. We owe her a fresh start. To Sarah's surprise, others began to nod in agreement. Mr. Hollister, the banker, spoke up. The bank can arrange compensation for your wrongful imprisonment, Mrs. Blackwood. And if you wish to sell your homestead, we'll ensure you receive fair value. Sarah hadn't expected this turn of events. She looked at Running Fox, whose subtle nod encouraged her. I appreciate that, she said carefully. But I've decided not to stay in Cottonwood Springs. There are too many memories here, both of my life with Thomas and of how quickly his friends and neighbors turned against me. Where will you go? Judge Parker asked. Sarah straightened her shoulders. There's land to the west Thomas spoke of. Good land with water, where a person might start fresh. Colonel Hargrove frowned. That's unsettled territory, Mrs. Blackwood. Dangerous for anyone, especially a woman alone. She won't be alone, Running Fox said, his voice matter of fact. I will guide her. Honor debt to Blackwood by ensuring his widow finds safety. The colonel looked as though he might object, but something in Running Fox's steady gaze made him reconsider. As Henderson was led away to the jailhouse, the crowd began to disperse. Sarah found herself standing with Running Fox on the boardwalk, watching the town return to its normal rhythms. Did you mean what you said? She asked quietly. About guiding me west? Meant every word, he replied. Blackwood saved my people. Now I help his people you. I'm just one person, Sarah said with a small smile. Hardly people. One person can become many, Running Fox said. Valley Blackwood found could be place where Comanche and White live without fighting. New beginning. Sarah considered this. It wasn't just about escaping painful memories or starting over for herself. It was about honoring Thomas's vision, a place where the divisions that had defined the frontier might begin to heal. Over the next week, Sarah sold the homestead and settled her affairs in Cottonwood Springs. The town's remorse translated into generous terms for her property and possessions. Henderson's trial was swift, his guilt established beyond doubt. He would hang for Thomas's murder, the same fate Sarah had nearly suffered. On her final night in town, Sarah visited Thomas's grave. She placed wildflowers on the fresh earth and opened his journal to the last blank page. There, she wrote her own entry. Thomas, I understand now why you kept secrets to protect others, to protect me. I'm leaving Cottonwood Springs to find that valley you loved. Running Fox will guide me. Perhaps there, your dream of peace might take root. I carry your memory with me, but I'm no longer bound by grief. You taught me to see beyond boundaries, between peoples, between worlds. Now I'll try to live that teaching. Dawn broke crisp and clear on the day of departure. Sarah mounted her horse, supplies packed for the long journey. Running Fox waited at the edge of town, patient and still. Sheriff Mills came to see them off, handing Sarah a folded paper. Deed to a parcel of land west of here, he explained. Not exactly where you're heading, but it gives you legal standing if you need it. Consider it the town's way of making amends. Sarah tucked the deed into her saddlebag. Thank you, Sheriff, for believing in my innocence when few others did. As they rode west, the rising sun at their backs, Sarah felt a strange lightness. The weight of false accusation was gone. The shadow of the gallows had lifted. Ahead lay uncertainty, hardship, and danger, but also possibility. Blackwood called it Echo Valley, Running Fox said as they crested a hill. Sawed mountains hold. Words spoken there, return them as blessing. How far? Sarah asked. 7 days' ride, passed through Comanche territory. Some of my people there, those who refuse reservation. They will help us because of Blackwood's name. Sarah nodded, picturing the valley as Thomas had described it, sheltered by mountains, with clear streams and fertile soil. A place between worlds, like Thomas himself had been. Like Running Fox was, like she was becoming. What do your people call beginnings? She asked. Running Fox considered this. Closest word means first breath of day, when night's darkness still holds world, but light promises change. Sarah watched the horizon unfurl before them, endless and full of possibility. First breath of day, she repeated. I like that. They rode west, a widow and a warrior, carrying between them the legacy of a man who had bridged two worlds. Behind them lay justice served and a noose that would never claim its intended victim. Ahead lay Echo Valley and the first breath of a new day. Sarah Blackwood, who had stood on the gallows with a noose around her neck, who had been saved by a silent Comanche stepping from the crowd, who had pursued her husband's killer across the Texas plains, urged her horse forward. The frontier stretched before her, harsh and beautiful and full of stories yet to be written. She was ready to write hers.